Hi everybody, welcome to Langer at the Mic. I'm Mike Langer. I want to upload at least one more video by the end of the week before things get really busy for me these next couple days. So I decided that today I'm going to make a way too early prediction of what the 2023-2024 Montreal Canadiens roster and lineup will look like. I'm going to try to make this as realistic as possible based on where the Montreal Canadiens are in their rebuild right now. And I'm also going to perhaps mistakenly assume everyone is fully healthy. So let's just get right into it. Starting with the forwards, and obviously I'll display my final lineup on Cap Friendly once I talk about the moves that the Canadiens are, or at least the significant moves that the Canadiens will make this offseason. So let's get right into the forwards. There are three big factors that are going to determine what the Montreal Canadiens forward group looks like next year. Number one, of course, is the Caulfield contract. I think that Cole Caulfield will obviously remain a Montreal Canadien. It's just a matter of whether he signs to a long-term deal or a bridge deal. But still, that's going to be a huge factor in terms of at least what the outlook of the forward group looks like in terms of a salary and cap hit standpoint. So number one is the Caulfield contract, of course. The second biggest factor is whether or not the Montreal Canadiens draft pick this upcoming summer will start and remain on the pro roster throughout the entire NHL season. And the third big factor is whether or not Pierre-Luc Dubois will be acquired by the Montreal Canadiens via trade this off season. So my answer to those three things is, first of all, I think that Caulfield will sign a long-term deal this offseason. I don't know if it's going to be $8 million or $9 million. I don't think it's going to be $10 million, but I'm going to guess $8.5 million, just split right down the middle. And secondly, I think I'm going to say that the Montreal Canadiens player that they're going to draft in the top 10, again, we don't know as of right now whether it's going to be at 5 or at 7 or one of the top 3 picks, but as of right now, I'm going to predict that the player that the Montreal Canadiens will draft will not be playing. He might start the season with the Montreal Canadiens, play the 10 games, but then get sent back to the CHL or to Europe or the USHL or college, whatever it may be. Either way, I predict that the player that the Montreal Canadiens are going to draft is going to be a really good player. It's just that they're not going to play the full season on the pro roster. And third of all, this is probably the most intriguing point, is that I do think that the Montreal Canadiens will find a way to trade for Pierre-Luc Dubois this upcoming off season. So yeah, that's the three big factors that will influence the outcome of the Montreal Canadiens roster at forward and their lineup, and also cap structure, of course. In terms of, now let's get into unrestricted free agents that I think they will re-sign. I think they will re-sign Alex Belzile. I think they will also re-sign Anthony Richard. I think that if the Canadiens give Anthony Richard a vet minimum one-way deal, he'll either make the team out of training camp or he'll get put on waivers. Anyway, but here's another interesting thing in terms of unrestricted free agents I think the Canadiens will sign is Sean Monahan. I think the Habs will try to keep Sean Monahan, and they might even sign him to a not too expensive one-year deal, where they give him also a modified no trade clause where he gets to influence where the Montreal Canadiens move him. And I think this is a thing where, again, the Canadiens want to do right or do well by Sean Monahan because of where he's at in his career right now, where he's at with his health. He said he was fully healthy by the end of the year, and that even though he did not play since, I think it was November or December, since breaking his foot. But yeah, either way, I do think the Montreal Canadiens will manage to re-sign Sean Monahan for not too much, and maybe even allow him to dictate where he gets traded to if the Canadiens do find a way to trade him by this year's upcoming deadline. Now, real quick, RFAs that they're going to re-sign, obviously Caulfield, I think that's a given, like I just mentioned. Raphael Alvi-Pinard, I think that's an easy decision as well. Michael Pezzetta, and Juuso Jääskeläinen. And I think that's pretty much a given that they'll keep those players as well. With Pezzetta, they'll be okay putting him on waivers, and if another team claims him, then good for him. He gets to play in the NHL with another team, but if not, he gets to go to Laval and alternate between Laval and Montreal as needed. But anyway, so now in terms of the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, real quick, I think the only way that this trade could get done in a way that makes sense is that obviously it has to involve Florida's first round pick in this upcoming draft. They did beat Boston on this Wednesday night in overtime in game 5 to force a game 6, which sucks, but is what it is. Hopefully the Bruins could beat the Panthers so that the Canadiens pick higher with that pick. But either way, I think that a trade for Pierre-Luc Dubois will involve obviously that pick this offseason, but also I think that they will have to move 2 out of the 3 of Josh Anderson, Joel Edmondson, and Christian Dvorak to another team, and then get resources, whether it's maybe not a first round pick, but some kind of prospect, maybe even a first round pick, but some kind of value in return that they could then add to Florida's first round pick, maybe even a second round pick, and maybe even someone like Jordan Harris or another prospect to then get Pierre-Luc Dubois in return for. So in other words, I think that the best way that a Pierre-Luc Dubois trade gets worked out this offseason is in a 3-way trade where the Canadiens also retain some salary. So what that looks like is they get Pierre-Luc Dubois, and also if any Jets fans are watching here, and if anyone wants to make fun of how ridiculous, the Jets would only trade Dubois for Caulfield or Suzuki, it seems pretty clear that Pierre-Luc Dubois will eventually become a Montreal Canadien either for free as a UFA or via trade. So if the Jets want to get something in return for Pierre-Luc Dubois, then they're going to have to settle for something. The ball is in the court of Pierre-Luc Dubois and the Montreal Canadiens in this whole situation. So it's just a matter of whether they want to work something out that makes sense for everyone involved. And I think also if they do trade away some veterans, like I mentioned, Edmondson and Dvorak possibly, and or Anderson, then they will be able to retain some salary, especially if it's Dvorak and Edmondson. I think the Canadiens would be more than willing to retain salary to then turn whatever they get in return for Edmondson and Dvorak to other teams, because again, they have no trade clauses, and I don't think they will be happy to go to Winnipeg. So if they get traded to a contending, desirable team to go to, Canadiens get something in return. They take that, the first round pick that belongs to Florida, and maybe another prospect to Winnipeg for Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think that's how it happens. So that's the forward group. Then defense, I think defense and goaltending is pretty straightforward, stays pretty much exactly the same as it was this year, except for Joel Edmondson getting traded, I think, this offseason. And then in net is Sam Montembeault and Jake Allen. So what this looks like, I'm just going to pull up my roster right here, is you have, I think Kirby Dach is he was brought in to be a center, but if they trade for Pierre-Luc Dubois, I think they're trading for Pierre-Luc Dubois to be a second centerman in front of or behind Nick Suzuki, which then would kind of make more sense to put Kirby Dach on the wing. So that's why I want to keep those 3 together of Suzuki, Kirby Dach, and Cole Caulfield. Then the second line would be Pierre-Luc Dubois, Josh Anderson, Raphaël Harvey-Pinard. And I think that would be a really effective second line given where the Montreal Canadiens are at in their rebuild. Then the third line, I'd like to think Juraj Slafkovsky would be on this third line and not the fourth line, with Sean Monahan and Brendan Gallagher, again assuming everyone's healthy. Sean Monahan, I think you could interchange with Christian Dvorak depending on what it takes to then bring in Pierre-Luc Dubois, but that's the third line: Slafkovsky, Monahan, Gallagher. Or as you can see, I'll get to some of the guys that are currently not in the top 4 lines. They could easily slide into Gallagher's spot if he gets injured, and could possibly even slide into Monahan's spot if he gets injured. But anyway, first the fourth line now: Jake Evans, Jesse Ylonen, and Mike Hoffman would be the fourth line. Mike Hoffman's contract expires only after 1 year. So either way, if the Canadiens do want to retain some salary in trades that they make for in terms of veterans that they trade, then they could afford to do so, given that Hoffman's salary or contract is off the book in another year. And then Armia and Belzile would rotate in and out of the lineup with guys like Ylonen, and maybe not Evans, Monahan if he gets hurt, Gallagher if he gets hurt. But also, what I like about this lineup, again, it's not by no means is this a Stanley Cup contending forward group, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. And you add whichever player the Canadiens draft in the top 5 or top 7, assuming it's a forward who is really, really good. You could plug that forward in pretty much anywhere in this lineup, And if they become what they're supposed to become, I'm talking maybe not even Bedard or Fantilli, but if it's, let's say, a Mitchkov in 4 years or by 2026, let's say if it's a Will Smith, let's say if it's a Leo Carlson, any one of those top forwards. Obviously, Fantilli, Bedard would slot in anywhere because of how good I think they'd be right off the bat. But ultimately, if you plug any of those players in and they become what they're supposed to become, you're looking at a pretty darn good forward group for the Montreal Canadiens for years to come right now. But also right now, even if Sean Monahan does get hurt, well, Kirby Dach, who ideally should play wing, he could always slot into a center position, a third line center position, which might not be ideal because that'll take away his minutes, but it'll just add some more depth at center behind Nick Suzuki and Pierre-Luc Dubois. And of course, Kirby Dach could still get number one power play unit time. And you could still, if Kirby Dach plays on the third line at center, then he could play with Jari Slafkovsky, which would be great. So basically more changes at forward. On defense, everything stays pretty much the same. Michael Matheson is your number one left-handed D. David Savard, assuming he's healthy, is your number one right-handed D as of right now. Here's where I think the second pair, what could be interesting if Goulet is healthy, I think Kovacevic could be a really good right-handed D partner for Caden Goulet as a second pair in Goulet's second year. So I'd be really happy to see that as of right now. And I think Kovacevic could still get even better than he was last year. Remember, he was one of very few Habs, not only defensemen, but Habs players last year that played pretty much the entire season and was a plus player, even though the Canadiens were a bottom 10 team. So Kovacevic, I think, would be a fine partner for Caden Goulet. And then you just round that out with Justin Barron. Hopefully he gets to establish a third pairing right side role over Chris Weidman, who's just there for backup, not just backup, but that's another story. And then Arbor Jacki, if he, assuming again he's healthy, rehabs, comes back ready to go, he'll play on the left side. And then, you could always call up maybe guys from Laval like Jaden Struble, just got signed to his ELC. He'll probably start in Laval. William Trudeau has had a pretty decent year with Laval. Maybe Norlander, but maybe even Mayu. Like basically, you could call up any defenseman from Laval that could slide into the right or left side if there are injuries on the blue line. And then at forward, of course, I did neglect to say Rem Pitlick and Michael Pezzetta would be the guys that would be put on waivers in this case. Assuming everyone again is fully healthy, which is, I keep saying, because that is not to be taken for granted by any means after a year like the Canadiens just had. But that doesn't mean that they won't get, or that means that they're ultimately going to play at some point, because there will be injuries and there will be a demand for them in the lineup. It's just a matter of when they will play in the lineup. Also have Sean Farrell starting in the AHL, Joshua Roy starting in the AHL as well. But I think Joshua and Sean Farrell will eventually get their chances again in 2023, 2024, and will solidify their spots in the lineup beyond. So that's pretty much it. Just wanted to share my my way too early prediction and preview of what the Montreal Canadiens roster will look like in 2023, 2024. What do you think it will look like? Let me know in the comment section below, of course. But as usual, if you enjoy my commentary, you enjoy my content, give me a big thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, give me a follow on Twitter and Instagram at Mike Langer for both. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again next time.